All right. On today's episode of Behind the Agency, I have Jeff Francis from Eno8. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, David, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I always like to start things off by getting the backstory for the beginning of your agency. So, how did you start Eno8? How'd you name it?
Yeah, that's I always get that question. Yeah, so uh, we started in '08 about 8.5 years ago, getting close to 9 years now. And originally started the business with a business partner. So um, I had been working with a company that did mobile app development, custom mobile apps, and um, had exited that business and was kind of trying to determine what I wanted to do next. And so had a lot of experience in custom product development and a lot of network connections kind of in that space. And so I had a lot of people asking me like, okay, well, are you gonna start your own now? And so I started getting that question a lot. And um, I was considering that, and but I didn't really think that doing something specifically focused on mobile was the right move for me. And so around that same time, I attended an event that a friend of mine was hosting, and got sat next to a contact that I had met, several years before and hadn't talked to in a while. And we started a conversation about kind of what I was up to and that kind of thing, and that turned into further conversations. And we started discussing, well, hey, why don't we do something together? And so we decided to explore creating a new business together, and then that turned into conversations about, okay, well, what is it going to focus on? What's sort of the niche? What are we going to try to do? And we looked at quite a few different options. Even though that was 9 years ago, AI was starting to get a lot of buzz, and people were trying to figure out like what would it mean to focus on AI. And we didn't really feel like the right choice was for us to focus specifically on one emerging technology, but we kind of viewed that a problem that we think will be around forever is that companies are going to need help innovating with whatever the new technology is at the time. And so, is there perhaps a way to focus on that problem, and then that could align us to help clients with AI or with IoT, or some of these other themes that were really starting to get a lot of buzz at that time. And so what we decided on is that we wanted to focus on being an innovation studio, and we wanted to really kind of make our name for helping clients to build innovative new software products, and in having a sort of approach that helped them really you know enable whatever sort of the emerging technology of the time is. And so that sort of led us to the name. Second part of your question of N08, sort of has a couple of different thoughts behind it. One was it's sort of a loose play on innovate, right, which aligned with our sort
Right.
of main theme for the business. And then sort of a side note was, in the process of kind of kicking around names, we discovered that the word Eno is kind of urban slang for wicked awesome or cool. And then the number 8 has a lot of you know um, symbology behind it, and so N08 is kind of what we settled on. And the third factor that made it really easy was it was a domain name that was available, and it was short. And so I have a really easy email address for the most part. And yeah, so that was kind of the original premise when we first started the business.
That's awesome. Well, I'm kind of curious. you know, Every agency, I feel like over time, they realize what their sweet spot is, kind of what they do best, and kind of use that to differentiate themselves. What did that look like for you? How have you figured that out, and what does it look like today?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a meandering journey for us at N08, because we had this sort of original premise, this original vision of what we wanted to do, and then you probably know, like starting an agency or a studio, you know, it's really important to generate revenue and find clients. And we needed to, you know, be able to, you know, start creating a team. And so because I had a lot of background in mobile, we early on we tended to find our way into a lot of opportunities helping to design and build mobile apps, and which was fine and it was great, and you know it was good business and we could do a really good job at that. And so that's the kind of work that we were taking on, you know, for the first several years. And you know, a couple of years into it, we had grown, we were profitable, you know, we were doing okay. I wouldn't say that we were blowing up growth, but we were building a decent business, and we had added some pretty good people to the team, and you know, a lot of those kinds of things were going well. But we really took a step back because, you know, we had sort of a conversation where we were just kind of honest with ourselves that we weren't really aligning with the original vision we have. We're really sort of just a generic dev shop. And you know, you can build a good business doing that. It's super hard because
Right.
it's a pretty crowded space and your message doesn't really have anything unique about it to resonate with the right types of clients. And so you know, even though we had that realization, it took a little while to make the adjustments because we had a conversation again. You know, I had a business partner at the time, and you know, the conversation was very much just a recognition that, hey, we're not aligning to our vision. We're not on the path that we set out to. We don't really like this. This kind of stinks, right? And
Hmm.
it was sort of uninspiring work too. And um, so, you know, recognizing it, I think, was the first step, but it took us quite a while to sort of figure out, like, well, okay, well, if we know we're not doing what we wanted to do, how do we get to a point where we do feel like we're doing what we want to do? And, you know, a lot of that was trying to figure out, like, okay, well, we want to focus on innovation. We want to be known for innovation and helping clients really sort of realize that and make it real. Um, what would that look like? And you know, we looked at a lot of different things, and you know, we started exploring. You know, design thinking started to become a little bit more popular around that time. And you know, quite frankly, at that time, I didn't really understand what design thinking was used for and what it looked like and what kind of resources you needed and that kind of thing. And but we you know, we kind of learned about it, explored, and you know, talked to our customers about it, talked to prospective customers about it, and started to get a little bit of clarity around, okay, we can utilize that approach, marry it with some other methodologies, and sort of create our own process that we can use to sort of deliver on that promise of helping clients, you know, innovate and build great products. And so we started engagements where we started doing smaller, sort of carved out engagements focused on more design and define type of work, and
Hmm.
assessments, and helping clients get really clear on things. And then, you know, around that same time too, we started to look at, okay, we've done a lot of custom development work before, and you know, when projects didn't go well, what was the problem? Right, either they were not going well when the client came to us, or we were working with a client and it wasn't going well. You know, what's common about these? And one of the things that started to get really clear is that many of the problems were because there wasn't a deep enough clarity around really key things before you dove headfirst into development work. And so we started to refine our process that we used up front, and then we, you know, eventually named it. We called it the innovation lab. And what we figured out is that if we can work with our clients up front to answer some of the real big questions that, if unanswered, kind of plague efforts down the road, then we can massively reduce risk for these product development initiatives. And then we can make sure we're more reliable on hitting budget and hitting timeline and being clear on, like, what does success look like, a lot of these kinds of things. And we were right. You know, that turned out to be a really good conclusion, and we've seen really good success by, like, like really sort of framing that up, creating a kind of a standard process around it, and then taking that to our clients before we actually start building anything.
Yeah. I'd love to come back to that later on in the conversation. One of the things you said that I wanted to get digging a little bit deeper in first was um, just having to shift. I imagine there's, with any sort of change, there has got to be some sort of anxiety or some level of anxiety of like, well, how do we make this shift? And I think you kind of hinted at it, but how did you approach kind of taking, you know, basically deciding number one, where you wanted to focus next, and then kind of um, initiating that process, like operationalizing it? Like, was it you had a hypothesis and then you're just like, well, let's just go all in. We're going to rip off the band-aid and say this is what we do now, or was it more of a like let's reach out to our network and try to line up some people that maybe we do think are a better fit for us?
Yeah, it was more of a gradual shift for us.
Mm.
We had our existing clients that we were working on. We didn't want to interrupt that, and it's not like we just abruptly changed like our whole branding and any kind of messaging we had or anything like that. But one of the things that we started to do is experiment in our conversations with new prospective customers. So we would ask questions a little bit differently. We would start to present options to them slightly different than we would have before. So, as an
Mm.
example, early on, a client comes to us and says, "Hey, we want to build this mobile app." Then we would typically jump into, okay, well, let's start defining what the mobile app will need to do, and let's create some requirements, and we'll give you an estimate and a plan and that kind of stuff, right? Which, by the way, that's a terrible way to build products. And so, so what we instead started to do is go, okay, what we would recommend doing is let's do, instead of jumping into development. I know you're looking for quotes and you're looking for a partner to build this. I think a lot of people will throw a number at you. Instead of doing that, why don't we start by digging in a little bit deeper, getting better information, give you some valuable deliverables in the process, and then we'll give you like a budget for the build out. And by the way, at the end of that first part of the process, if you feel like you want to go reshop that again, you have some artifacts here that is going to allow you to go out and get much better estimates from everybody. So you're not even obligated to continue working with us. And I think that positioning it like that landed really good with clients because they didn't feel like they were really locked in to anything big. They were sort of taking a small step. And I think they bought into the premise that you can reduce the risk by, taking a bite instead of like jumping all
Yep.
in. And so it was a little bit more of a gradual transition. And then the more that we had those conversations and kind of saw that it was resonating, then we started to tweak some of our marketing collateral, like our, maybe our presentation decks and things that we would give to people early on in the sales process. We went ahead and made those changes formally to our messaging. And then as we saw that start to work, we started to gradually more and more change, right? And so until the
Right.
point where we, started changing the website and all that kind of stuff to really start with that message and get clients to see value in that. And I think one other thing is I think I worked with a consultant to help us out with some marketing and messaging stuff several years ago, and he worked specifically with consulting companies, kind of like what you do. So maybe you've heard this before, but he talked a lot about is your target client, are they problem aware, solution aware, or product aware? Like where are they there? And what that means is that they are they even aware of the problem that you solve and that they have that problem or will have that problem? So that's sort of the first step. And then if they are aware of that and they acknowledge that, then are they aware that there are potential, options or solutions that can help resolve that problem? And then the next stage beyond that is product aware, meaning like the Eno8 Innovation Lab is the solution to that problem. And so we started to figure out that, okay, a lot of talking to clients is educating them, making them problem aware, because
Right.
for example, we work with a lot of founders of companies that may not have built a product before. So they don't really know what they don't know at that point. And so educating them on, hey, here's the really common pitfalls that you may not even know that you're going to step into that are really common. So educating, on that problem awareness first. So, it was really gradual, like sort of transition for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned, kind of testing the waters with these sales conversations, and then it kind of worked its way out into marketing collateral and things like that. Um, I guess what I guess my question is, um, how did you go about kind of getting a lot of those phone calls, or those calls in the first place? Was it, I guess this kind of gets into more of like a customer acquisition, or a, putting yourself out there. Was it through network,
Yeah.
or publishing yourself somewhere, conferences, things like that?
Yeah. I think, early on, much like, many sort of professional services types companies, it was personal network. That was our primary driver of new business. And, you know, uh, we we worked a lot to try to find like the silver bullet to making it just flood us with leads. And even to this day, I don't believe that exists. I think what we've found success in is you have to find, a handful of things that have a high probability of success, and then you have to do those really consistently over a long period of time. But yeah, especially early on, it was network and referrals, which is still important to us today. But along the way, we've started to add additional um, tactics to our mix that kind of go together to help create a pretty steady flow of like new conversations.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of a, um, I lost my train of thought. Shoot. Well, I guess one question I had is, do you, well, actually, we hit on this earlier, but you kind of stumbled upon this innovation lab as being like a really great introductory point, into kind of broader work. Can you unpack that a little bit more, just to kind of like, I guess, explain to viewers what that is, and, yeah, I guess kind of maybe how you landed on that um, as how you wanted to kind of productize what you guys do?
Yeah, again, it's not like we sat in a big strategy session and we sort of master planned it and then kind of did a big bang introduction. We gradually tweaked it over time. Now there were certain points where we kind of had breakthroughs, like with certain clients that had a need, and we did put a lot of thought into what do we think is the right approach for them, and then we learned from that, and then we sort of tweaked that going into the next similar conversation until we got to a point where it was pretty standardized. But
Mm.
some of the big challenges early on, as we were starting to kind of see that as the path we wanted to follow, was, all the basics, like what would the deliverables of this be? How do we price this? What kind of resources are we going to need? Do we have those resources already? Um, what should the time frame for it be? All those kinds of things. We had to figure a lot of that kind of stuff out. And so we did have several clients. Like I remember one in particular where we had a terrific uh, chief architect working for us at the time that had some experience in sort of a studio type of environment. And so we gave him sort of a project to sort of come up with a presentation for what we would propose to do on a particular client. He did a really great job of pulling that together. Honestly, there was a lot of like spinning wheels, a lot of wasted effort on trying to put things together. But looking back, those were sort of stepping stones to get us to the point where like we had enough clarity on our part to actually put something in front of a client that made sense. And so yeah, there was a lot of different things to figure out. And then, we started with our, what I would call like our innovation lab 1.0, like our first version of it that I felt like was really resembling sort of like a standardized process, kind of like what we use today. We learned from those and we continued to iterate on it. So we, along the way, figured out, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we did in a lot of the early innovation labs is one of the deliverables was we would write the user stories for the MVP version, or like what we call the minimum lovable product, the MLP. We would actually write the user stories for that first release as part of our innovation lab. And what we figured out is that the effort to value mix wasn't right. That wasn't like the best use of the hours for the client at that point in time.
Mm,
And after doing a few of those, we figured out that, we can probably better serve the client and use the budget in more impactful ways at that stage if we go with more of like an epic level, like requirements or feature list, and then we estimate effort more at like an epic level rather than down to like the story level. And we made that adjustment. Then what that did is that helped us free up more of that budget to focus on more of the UI UX design, get a little further with the design prototyping, maybe get a little bit more detailed on the budget planning and resourcing, so that the estimates were going to come in really accurate. So that's one example of like one of the tweaks that we made along the way. And then, another one that worked out really good was, we the first several early versions of the innovation lab, we had one team that did the lab, and then we handed it off to a different team to do the execution. And we found a lot of gaps in that process, right? Because you had people that were in a lot of these detailed sort of planning and, like thoughtful conversations about what's the right way to do something, that weren't involved in the execution phase. And so that was another thing that we changed, is we really try to make sure there's continuity between the team that does the innovation lab, then continuing in some capacity in the execution phase. And that really helped a lot, to streamline that and, avoid gaps and that type of thing.
yeah. Zooming out, like as a business, it makes sense that like the innovation lab would be a great first step. But um, I guess have you found that it's like do people will they do the innovation lab and then go somewhere else, or is it worked out well that it's like this contained thing, but it very naturally can flow into a longer engagement?
It's happened occasionally, but it doesn't really happen very often. It, if they don't have us do the build phase, it's usually because they have an in-house team, but they didn't have the sort of
Mm,
niche expertise that they would need to sort of do what we do in the innovation lab. So that's part of the thought process. But even in those scenarios, the ones that I can think of, when we did the innovation lab for them and they were going to execute it in-house, they still tapped us to add a dedicated team to the effort, to help like move it along. So it's
yeah,
still kind of trying to work. We have had people do innovation labs and then they decide not to move forward, and you know at all. And in my mind, that's still a pretty successful outcome, because so many times people think they should build a product, they dive right into getting developers and starting to write code, and then they don't find out that it's a really flawed ideal until they try to launch it and nobody cares, right?
right,
And so we've had some instances where we did the innovation lab and then it just doesn't get the blessing to move forward, to be built, for whatever
hmm
reason. And sometimes it's because we discover stuff in the lab process that helps them better understand what the problem is they're trying to solve and what the alternatives to that solution are. And they ended up deciding, hey, we just don't think that it's worth us making the investment necessarily.
yeah. I mean, you're saving them money in the long run, even if it's
Yeah,
like you don't save the cost of the innovation lab itself. You're preventing them from essentially you know going further down a path that was going to be a bad path to go down in the first place.
that's right. And it's still a win. It may not feel like it, but they
Yeah,
would definitely thank us if they went down that path and found out much later where they had a lot of capital invested into it, a lot of time invested into it, and then it just ultimately fails.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask, kind of switching gears, have partnerships with other types of agencies, any other entities, uh, played a role at all in your agency growth?
Absolutely, a huge role, I think. I mean, I'm a personally a really big fan of strategic partnerships, and we've used them in all kinds of different ways. We've used them for business development, where we form relationships with partners that are you know, prospecting the same type of folks that are a good fit for us, but are non-competitive. So, having those relationships where we might be able to, refer people to them, or they might be able to refer people to us. Um, Partnerships even on the resourcing side, especially on bigger engagements where we don't have those resources on our bench already. Having good strong partners that we trust and are aligned with us, in terms of values and the way that they do business. What we use strategic partnerships on that side too. And then even outside of the actual delivery work that we do, even on our marketing side, we have several partners that we work with there, that we treat like employees, but they're partners that we freelance or contract with on certain things, but they don't really feel like that just because of the way that we structure the engagement working together.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And other partnerships too, just I mean, the network is really important in professional service work. And so you know uh, partnership's a pretty broad word, but I like to think of it a lot as just having a philosophy that I don't need to take the last dollar. Like, it's okay to leave it, take a dollar and leave a dollar. It's okay for other people to make a fair profit. Make it really a scenario where everybody can win. And it's just about growing the pie. And I think that's a trap that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into, is they feel like they really got to negotiate, down to the last dollar, or
More
they have
like a
to negotiate
scarcity
the best
mindset.
deal. Very scarcity mindset. Working with partners, getting caught up on small percentage points, or like elements of making an agreement that you can get somebody to agree to it, or you can make them feel good about it, and it's still good for you. And I tend to tilt more towards, I don't really want to try to get the absolute best deal that I can. It's more important to me to make sure that the partner uh, feels good about it, right? And that I feel good about it. And if we can land in that zone, then they're actually going to be a partner. What I've seen before, when an agreement with a partner wasn't good enough for them, then maybe you do a deal or agree to some sort of arrangement, but it just doesn't really turn into anything. And that just doesn't do, that's just a waste of time for everybody. Right. So
Yeah.
might as well try to make sure everybody feels good about it. And it's something that everybody feels like they can all win. And then, it can take on momentum after that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, where do you see N08 headed in the years ahead? Do you have a broad vision, or are you kind of figuring it out year by year?
I think with the pace that everything is changing right now, I think I would love to think that I could have a plan that's, a 3 year or 5 year or a 10-year plan. But I think that the reality is that everything is changing so rapidly that you have to try to think about a longer term plan, but you have to be very flexible, and you have to um, also have plans that are much much shorter in term, right? And 6 month, 1 month, or 1 year kind of horizon. And so I think for us, I think that we solve a big problem. I think failed software product development efforts is still a huge problem. And I think that part of our mission is to try to prevent failed software projects. And our way of doing that is the innovation lab. Um, that works when you're building new products. It works when you're sort of stepping into an existing product that you want to make some pretty significant changes to. So I think that we'll continue to focus on the innovation lab, and then having our other service offerings that are aimed at different parts of the life cycle for those clients. But we couldn't have a conversation like this without me talking a little bit about what the impact of AI is going to be on our space, and us
Yeah.
trying to plan and be mindful of, like, what does that look like. I think in the short term, you know using AI just to be more productive all around, whether it's the developers or QA, or whether it's, more on the sales and marketing or operations side of the house. We're internally trying to make sure that we're aware of what's available, and we're constantly trying to just use it, put our hands on it, try it for stuff, and see where it actually gains us a lot of efficiency and benefit. And then we can find ways to translate that into our offer to our clients. Um, I think one of the things that is pretty interesting right now that we're keeping our eye on is, how is sort of the rise of the agent approach to AI potentially going to affect software products? So
Mm.
an example is I was at an event, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, where they were talking about, the folks on the panel were talking about, headless SaaS applications, right? Or being more interested in working with software companies that offer their product API only, right? And then using their own agents to interface with it. And so I think
Mm.
as we see these real life use cases of AI emerging, it gets a little more clear on how it sort of fits in and what's the real sort of business value that's being driven out of that. Then, I could see us starting to adapt our innovation lab to aim at some of those specific, problems or opportunities within sort of the software product development domain, but like focused in on being ready for the impact of AI and agents. I think that's something that we're keeping our eyes on really close right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us are. It is kind of it's amazing the pace at which like new things are coming out that you're like, oh, this makes this easier or this makes this obsolete,
Yeah,
and this kind of it's both scary and exciting at the same time. It's kind of kind
it
of
is. It
a
is. But
range of emotion.
I've really, I've struggled to really myself settle on what's my opinion. Like if I was forced to make my prediction on what is it going to look like for our space a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, I think I'm in the camp that I think it will impact some jobs, like software development jobs, and maybe like the need for headcount, maybe. But I think it's more likely that we just produce a lot more stuff a lot faster, right? Like we could do it cheaper. Resources will use these tools to build better software faster, and that pace of developing new products, innovating, it's just going to continue to exponentially increase. And so I think I'm maybe I'm an optimist, but I feel like the future for the need for software development is going to continue to increase. But I also think that it makes it even more important to have a good way to know what to build, right? And sort of back to what we're doing with our innovation lab is
Yeah.
that's sort of a primary problem we're solving is having clarity on what is the problem, what's the right solution, you know, how do we design this? Like, what's a good user experience? What's the good technical approach? Like setting the vision and being clear about what your sort of plan is, and then really leveraging a lot of the new AI options to help you do that faster, more efficiently, better. That's kind of where I feel like things are going to go.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's not like dystopian like a lot of people want to make it out to be. There's been big leaps in history forward in technology that yes, the car made horse-drawn carriages obsolete, but
Yeah,
it didn't mean that we no longer had to get from point A to point B, and that wheels were obsolete or something like that. It was just it changed some of the mechanisms, and you still had to know how to drive a car. And I think you're still going to have teams of like agencies might just need to have more people with a skill set in how to operate particular AI tools to code at a more rapid pace, or
yeah,
to what I mean.
yeah. And now one challenge I do think is pretty realistic that I've read and talked to people about is that, you know as AI begins to get used more in development efforts, it's going to start by doing some of the things that maybe more junior or fresh developers would typically have been able to do, right? And eventually, what's the effect of that, right? So you're always going to need really strong technical resources, even if AI is playing a big role in it. But where are those really strong technical resources going to come from if there's not, you know, inexperienced resources cutting their teeth and gaining that experience. And so I think that's another thing to keep our eye on is like, what does the pipeline look like for talent, and how is that talent getting better to the point where, a junior resource can become a very senior resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of the professional development angle.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. This is, I don't know, you've given me a lot to think about. Um, and I'm a big fan of the innovation lab sort of model. Um, just, I think that is just a huge problem of knowing what to build and kind of validating it up front before you've poured too many resources into that. So I think that's one of my big takeaways. For anyone who's tuning in and is interested in either going through the innovation lab or just kind of connecting with you to talk shop, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So you could check out our website at eno8.com. It's ENO and then the number 8.com. Or I'm really active on LinkedIn. So you can look me up, Jeff Francis, Eno8 on LinkedIn. And you feel free to drop me a direct message. I watch those pretty close. So yeah, if you have any thoughts or questions, reach out. Love to help out any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jeff, for coming on the show, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, my pleasure, David. Great talking with you.
Likewise.